There was a reason for this, and it wasn't just to support that boulder.
It could go deeper.
It could.
Yeah.
What's under the Lot 8 stone cradle could rewrite Oak Island. A trench dug 6 feet from the cradle hits slate bedrock. Inside the cradle the same week, the hand excavation is already deeper than that, and the shovel hasn't touched rock. Marty Lagina just left a 1-ounce gold coin sitting on those worked stones to mark where the first drill of season 14 goes. The hole that doesn't have a floor. A trench dug 6 feet from the Lot 8 stone cradle hits slate bedrock at 6 feet. Inside the cradle the same week, a hand excavation is already past that depth. The shovel still hasn't touched rock. 2 holes a few feet apart on the same lot, dug in the same week. One of them has a floor, where you'd expect. The other one keeps going. That's the geometry season 13 of The Curse of Oak Island leaves on screen at the end of last year. And it's the geometry that brings Marty Lagina back to that exact spot, in the season's final minutes, to set a 1-ounce Canadian maple leaf gold coin down on those worked stones as a physical marker. The coin is not a discovery. It's a commitment. It marks where the first drill of season 14 is going to go. For 2 centuries, every searcher on Oak Island has dug east. The cradle sits 1.5 kilometers west of the money pit, on a lot once owned by an 18th century black loyalist farmer named Samuel Ball, who arrived in Nova Scotia after the American Revolution and bought up 9 lots on this island across his lifetime. And what's missing from inside that cradle is what should have been there. What came out from under the boulder. The cradle came out of the ground in season 13, episode 16, in an episode called Raising the Stakes. The team brought in a heavy crane and lifted a large boulder off the surface of Lot 8, the kind of boulder that doesn't move without serious equipment and a serious reason. The boulder itself was the size of a small car, and the cameras held on it as the chains took the weight and the team waited to see what was underneath. What was underneath was a basin-shaped feature made of worked stones, held together with binder, set into the ground in a way that nobody had ever recorded on the show before. The stones weren't natural fall. They were placed. The mortar between them wasn't dirt that had compacted over time. It was binder formulated and applied by someone who knew how to do that.
The reality is there are lead and silver beyond baseline values within the structure itself, possibly in association with a shaft or a tunnel.
That's the cradle. Worked stones, held in mortar, roughly the size you'd expect to cap something rather than to be something on its own. And the team brought in the analysis on what those stones had to say. Archaeometallurgist Emma Culligan and Dr. Ian Spooner ran the chemistry on the binder. The mortar holding the cradle stones together pointed, on their analysis, to the 1200s. That's not a confirmed construction date on the cradle as a whole feature. What their work returned was a date range on the material that made the cradle stick together. But that material had a chemistry that fits the 13th century. Then Spooner ran his handheld XRF spectrometer across the soil column around the cradle. The readings came back with lead-bearing ash signatures in layers consistent with worked material deposition. Whatever was happening on this lot, at some point, involved fire and metal. None of that on its own broke the money pit's hold on the search. Lot 8 was interesting. Lot 8 wasn't yet a structural problem. That changed with the trench. A date that has company. The mortar number, the 1200s, wouldn't carry much on its own. Mortar chemistry has a margin. Buildings get reused. A 13th century construction date for a roughly basin-shaped stone feature on a Nova Scotia island is a curiosity, not a thesis. What changes the number's weight is the company it keeps. 2 lots away from the cradle, a separate stone foundation, round, on Lot 5, has been dated by Professor Adriano Gaspani of the Brera Observatory in Milan. Gaspani works in archaeoastronomy. It's the field that reads the way stone features align with specific stars at specific points in the slow wobble of the Earth's axis, called precession. Because precession moves the night sky on a cycle of about 26,000 years. A stone monument aligned to a particular star is essentially a clock face. You can run the math backwards and find the year the alignment would have been perfect. The method doesn't borrow from chemistry, carbon, or typology. It uses the sky as its evidence base. Gaspani's read on the Lot 5 round foundation, approximately 1236 AD. His read on Nolan's cross, the larger stone formation that threads across multiple western lots, approximately 1217 AD. The mortar method and the stellar alignment method are blind to each other. One reads minerals in binder, the other reads angles between stone and sky. Both return the same century on different features a few hundred yards apart on the same side of the same island. The Western thesis runs further than the Cradle, and further than this season. In Season 12, Episode 12, the team walked through a map analysis that flagged the former McGinnis family parcels, Lots 1 and 21, as candidate locations for a deposit separate from the Money Pit. A blacksmithing expert named Marty Lagina from the Ross Farm Museum in Nova Scotia had previously dated a set of iron swages found on Lot 21 to a window of roughly 1450 to 1750. That's evidence that someone with metalworking capacity was active on the western lots well before the Onslow Company arrived in 1804 to start the eastern search. That's the backdrop the Cradle landed against. Charles Barkhouse, the team's longest tenured historian, said the line on camera. The picture on the western lots is starting to look European, 13th century, and consistent with itself. Then came the trench. In Season 13, Episode 23, an episode called Island Hopping, Marty Lagina ordered a control trench dug immediately beside the Cradle. The point of a control trench is straightforward. When you want to know whether a feature is structurally meaningful, you compare the ground inside the feature to the ground a few feet outside it. If the surrounding ground gives bedrock at 6 feet, you'd expect the feature to either give bedrock around the same depth or to be obviously different in a way the geology explains. The trench hit slate at 6 feet. Inside the Cradle, Fiona Steele was hand excavating. Hand excavation is the slow methodology archaeology requires: small tools, methodical removal, stratigraphic care. The point isn't speed. The point is to know exactly what came out at what level, in case the order matters. By the time Marty's trench came back with its bedrock answer at 6 feet, Steele's hole inside the Cradle was already deeper than that, and the shovel hadn't touched rock. 2 adjacent holes on the same lot dug in the same week. Different geology underneath. By a depth that grows with every day, Steele's hand excavation continues. Marty said the line on camera. The Cradle is capping a shaft. The team came back to that mismatch in the season finale. In an episode called Pure Gold, Dr. Ian Spooner brought a hammer drill onto Lot 8 and drove 2 3-foot test holes into the Cradle floor itself. When the cores came up, Laird Niven, the team's Micmac licensed site archaeologist, looked at them and gave them a single-sentence assessment: too soft for bedrock. Hand excavation continued. The depth went past the slate level Marty's trench had hit. Still no rock floor. 2 independent dating methods returning the same century, a surrounding ground bedrock comparison that says the inside of the Cradle isn't behaving like the rest of the lot, and a tool test through the Cradle floor that comes up soft when the surrounding stone is hard. Stack those 3 things, and you have a feature that is structurally interrogating its own surroundings and refusing to give the expected answer. That's the picture the season ends on. What the Cradle could also be. There's an honest counter to the shaft reading, and the team itself acknowledges it. The bedrock mismatch is real. So is the mortar date, and so are the lead-bearing ash signatures in the soil column. None of those, individually, requires a shaft underneath. The Cradle could be a base for something now lost, a platform for a structure long since rotted out, a footing for a feature that never made it into the historical record. It could be a ceremonial installation built on something that yields to slow excavation because it's organic fill, not because it's a void. It could be a much later colonial-era reuse of older stones, somebody in 17-something repurposing the Cradle for a purpose nobody recorded, with the medieval period mortar getting reused right along with the stones. Past the surrounding bedrock depth is not the same as into a chamber. Marty Lagina's own framing on camera, in the same finale that brought in the hammer drill, holds that boundary. The feature, in his words, can't be considered finished until the team understands what lies beneath it. That's not a man who already thinks he knows. That's a man pointing at the spot where the next answer needs to come from. The team's working hypothesis is the shaft reading, and the evidence is consistent with it. But consistent isn't confirmed. The hand excavation could reach another 3 feet and hit rock that the trench missed because of how the slate runs through this part of the lot. Or it could go another 30 feet and hit a void that closes the question for good. Both outcomes are inside what the artifacts allow. What the first drill of Season 14 needs to deliver is the answer the Cradle has refused to give from the inside. 2 centuries pointed east. For 230 years, every searcher on Oak Island has dug east. The Onslow Company arrived in 1804 and went after the money pit. The Truro Company followed them, then Chappell, Blair, Dunfield, Blankenship, and the modern Lagina-era team. 2 centuries of capital, machinery, and lives all pointed at one collapsed coordinate on the eastern side of the island. The Lot 8 Cradle is the first feature in the modern search that pulls focus west with something more than a map theory behind it. If the shaft reading holds, if the missing rock floor under the Cradle is a void rather than fill, then the money pit stops being the answer Oak Island has been looking for and becomes one of several questions. The western lots reorganize around the Cradle the way the eastern lots have always organized around the pit. Lot 8 becomes a candidate deposit site. Lot 5's round foundation reads as a parallel feature dated to within decades of the Cradle's mortar, and the McGinnis family parcels at Lots 1 and 21 stop being a map exercise and become drill targets. That's the rewrite, not a small one. 2 centuries of search strategy, 2 centuries of investor pitches, 2 centuries of episode-to-episode storytelling on this show, all built around an Eastern Pit thesis that may have been pointing at the wrong half of the island the whole time. The team isn't saying that yet, not on camera, not in those words, but the coin Marty set down at the close of the season is sitting on the western side, not the eastern one. Marty Lagina's commitment to it is concrete. The 1-ounce Canadian maple leaf gold coin he set on the Cradle at the close of Season 13 is the spot where the first drill of Season 14 goes. The geochemical rationale he cited for the priority is the 2024 Shaft 2A wood reading. That wood, pulled from a different shaft in a prior season's work, came back from Spooner's lab with the highest silver and 3rd highest gold readings recorded on the entire island. Marty's read, organic material near a suspected shaft, if it pulls metals the way Shaft 2A's wood did, is the geochemical signature you look for when you're trying to find what the original depositors put in the ground. If Season 14 pulls wood out from under the Cradle and that wood reads like Shaft 2A's, the Western thesis stops being a thesis. The first 3 feet. Season 13 is over. Filming for Season 14 begins in the early summer. The Cradle is still sitting there, with the coin on it, waiting for the drill. Whatever the team pulls out of the first 3 feet beneath those worked stones is going to either turn the Western Cache thesis into a working dig program or send them back east with a stranger feature on Samuel Ball's lot, and no answer for what built it. The hand excavation has already gone past the depth at which the surrounding lot's slate bedrock turned up. The next 3 feet decide whether past the bedrock depth becomes into a void, or whether the absence of rock floor inside the Cradle has an explanation nobody on the team has caught yet. This story doesn't sit alone. The reason the Lot 8 Cradle landed with the weight it did at the end of Season 13 is that the team's red on the whole western side of the island has been reshaping for 2 seasons under the pressure of a different body of evidence, the symbolic and iconographic case the show has been building, find by find, that the original work on this island traces back to a specific cultural origin a long way from Nova Scotia. If you haven't seen the deep dive on that symbolic evidence the team has been chasing across the western lots, that's the thread that explains why the Cradle's location and date land where they do.